Oh, yeah, Man on the Moon.
And what happened when you were in the...
Okay, so I was doing the acting thing for a while, and I did Riff Raff, and I got to do a couple of featured extras, extras or featured extras, and have a little line here or there. I was actually in Old School, Will Ferrell's brother-in-law in the wedding scene. My line was cut, but that was like the biggest kind of part I got. Like I had a trailer and, all that kind of stuff. Then I was in Boogie Nights. I'm in the opening scene. And I was in American Pie in a cafeteria scene, and then Man on the Moon. So I worked the last 3 days of production on Man on the Moon. They were shooting that final scene where it's after Andy Kaufman dies, but Tony Clifton appears performing at the Comedy Store. Mm. It was actually in real life that happened, but it was Bob Zmuda, his partner by that point, that Paul Giamatti plays, was pretend. Now in the movie, they pan the camera over and you see actually Paul Giamatti there, so they give you the idea of like, oh, is Andy maybe not dead? But it's all, that's all just for the movie. So it was 3 days, Comedy Store, Jim Carrey in Tony Clifton makeup and attire, and because he was, if you saw the Netflix documentary that he did, he was Andy as Tony the entire time that I was working with him. So he's on the stage of the Comedy Store, and I was in the front. They sat me in the front. So for 3 days, I'm in the front table, and you can't see me in the actual movie because of the angles of the camera. But in the documentary, because there was a camera behind him, you can actually see me right in the front. And so, I was just hanging out for 3 days, and they were smoking fake cigarettes, but I think this was 98, so I think they hadn't passed the law yet in LA for cigarette smoking in bars and restaurants.
Oh, no.
So I think everyone was smoking.
Right.
It was kind of like everyone got to smoke. It was like being at a casino in Vegas. So everyone gets to smoke. So there was an ashtray on my table, and this was like the third day, and it was going to be the final day of shooting on the entire film. And he comes out and he sings, "Once you da 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 da."
I will survive.
I will survive. I will survive. That's what it was. So Tony Clifton singing "I will survive" at the end. So he'd done it already from a bunch of different angles and blah blah blah. And so he and Milos Forman are talking on stage in between shooting, and I'm sitting right there. They didn't clear out the extras, and so they're arguing about something, not arguing, but, talking about something. And Jim Carrey leans over and uses my ashtray in character as Tony Clifton. And then he looks around. He does like the look around. "Hey, kid." And so I lean in. "Do you want to get famous?" I said, "Yeah." "Do you want to get rich?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Give me your hand." Give him my hand. He takes the cigarette butt, puts it in my hand, closes my hand, and says, "Go home and clone me." And that was my interaction with Jim Carrey. So then once we had captured his side of performing the song, then they needed to capture the band and close-ups of Paul Giamatti and the audience. So it didn't matter at that point what Jim Carrey was doing to perform to amuse us, as long because they were getting reaction shots. So he did, and it was a couple of days before Halloween, he did an impression of Tim Curry in Rocky Horror Picture Show doing the Transylvanian, whatever that song's called. He did Tony Bennett doing I Left My Heart in San Francisco. He did Sammy Davis Jr. doing Candyman, right? Candyman?
Yeah, the Candyman.
And he did Kermit the Frog, The Rainbow Connection. Yeah. And it was amazing. And then the band, and then at the end of the last day, they brought it, and it's in the documentary, they bring out the cake and Danny DeVito and Milos. And that was the only time that Jim broke character and kind of talked to the audience. And so, okay, flash forward years later, right before
but wait a minute.
Okay.
What did they miss in the movie and the documentary, the most important part of Andy Kaufman's life?
Did he have a sister and they don't mention it? Is it something like that? Like they erased the family member?
Had to do with Brian Lally.
Oh, okay. So, okay. So, well, I don't know.
I taught him how to play Pac-Man.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. At the deli.
Yes.
Yes.
Jerry's Famous Deli.
Well, so flash forward.
Oh, we're passing over that?
Well, I'm trying to give you the punchline of the story. You're interrupted. You're killing the story.
I'm killing the
Yes.
story. I'm killing the story.
Flash forward 20 years, and right before the pandemic, I do the junket for the first Sonic the Hedgehog and interview Jim Carrey. And we were doing a little bit of I had 10 minutes, which was longer than usual, so we were doing a little career retrospective. And he was talking a little bit Man on the Moon and Andy and all that. And so at the end of the interview, they basically yelled cut, but I leaned into him and I just said, actually, I was an extra on Man on the Moon, and I was actually there on the last day. And he's got up out of his seat, big arms, embraced me, said, thank you for being a part of that, and Andy thanks you too.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, yeah.
That's amazing.
And yeah, he was great, but it's always a little startling when that happens.
Did he ask if you cloned him?
No, there wasn't enough time to remind him of that story. You know what I mean? You have to kind of be careful of how much, you only have so much time.
So, you got into journalism and you started interviewing, stars.
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah.
In person. So you worked for the big Chinese publication. What was the name?
Right, M-Time.
M-Time.
Yeah, so it was sort of the Fandango of China. Right.
So where did you start? How did you...
While I was still an actor, I was working in post-production. I had a roommate from Emerson who was a apprentice editor and got me in on a movie called The Clearing with Robert Redford and Willem Dafoe and Helen Mirren. And that editor, Kevin Tent, was Alexander Payne's editor and has edited all his movies. So I got brought on to Sideways. So I worked in post-production on Sideways.
Right.
And then worked on a bunch after that, Jumper with Doug Liman and a few others. And around that time that I was working on Jumper, I kind of was realizing the acting thing wasn't really working for me. I got in a Wendy's commercial and a couple of things in the play and stuff like that. But, I was going on a lot of auditions, but not, and I think I got sick of sort of at 28 or 29, being an out of work actor. I just didn't like that anymore. And so I was trying to think, well, what else?
I wouldn't know what that was.
Yeah, I didn't like
because I had my 31st birthday coming up.
Well, I didn't like the idea of my parents being like, "What's he doing? And is he going to be okay?" And I was also sick of my career, and my job and my career were two different things, and had been for 10 years. And I wanted my job and my career to be the same thing.
That's cool.
I sort of started wanting to get into comic books because I loved comic books. So I was thinking, well, maybe I could edit comic books or work for DC or something like that. And then, long story short, I got a job writing for Wizard Magazine covering Comic-Con 2006. And so that was my entry level into it. And so I did that for them for a couple of years, freelance stuff. Also, I was working in post-production, so I could get an interview with Doug Liman, for the new Knight Rider TV show he was producing or something like that.
Right.
So I was doing a lot of that kind of stuff, getting interviews that I could get and doing interviews that they would assign me. Worked for Comic Book Resources for a couple of years, but again, I was still just sort of freelancing while I was doing post-production work. And then in 2009, got offered a job with MovieWeb, and that's where I started doing film criticism on top of interviews, and also doing set visits and junket and being part of the junket cycle.